Okay, once again, thank you guys for joining this session. My name is Paul. I'm the CEO of the Mage Cloud. Long story short, we do a lot of stuff with e-commerce, Magento, WooCommerce, and Shopify, and we decided to do a partner webinar with Sift as the major provider for the fraud systems. So I want to welcome Jane Lee as a trust and safety, like chief of trust and safety from Sift. We will split this session in two things. I will probably start with pretty much generic stuff, what you guys can do with your website to try to protect against the hackers, etc., like general things that you have to watch, and probably then we'll have a Jane who will cover the rest. But before we even start, maybe Jane, want to say welcome to you. Maybe you can give a little bit of feedback about like your role, etc. Maybe introduce Sift in a short sentence.
Sure. Oh, excuse me. It's 9 a.m. here, so that's why my voice is a little raspy. But hi, everyone. My name is Jane, and I am a trust and safety architect at Sift. We are a machine learning platform that partners with a number of companies ranging in sizes to provide a effective fraud solution. I've been at Sift for a little over, yeah, I guess almost 2 years now. And before that, I spent about 5 years working on fraud prevention at Facebook.
That's awesome. So let's get this ball running in general. So let me probably start with the following. About 1 year ago, we had a very similar webinar about security, and I mean, till now, that's basically something that you have to pay a huge attention to. That's basically a lot of tweets that I collected on LinkedIn the other day about some issues with the security, etc., etc. So if you spend like 5 minutes of your time Googling that, you will see that security is the number one stuff that you have to care on. Recently, the company called Sunsec that we have a good chance to partner with, they detected a vulnerability inside of the Magento 2 platform. So basically what I want to say about that, so Sunsec as a platform, they basically sometimes finding those issues even faster than the shopping cart vendor can find it. So basically, I will leave this link to you if you want to read it. They basically doing a good job identify those issues and report obviously to the vendors. So if you want to be a little bit ahead of time, maybe it works for you to subscribe to Sunsec.io. They have a form on their website about all upcoming vulnerabilities, etc. So this is really something that I would recommend you to do at least. Basically, what I really like about this tool, it's a special app that will be installed on your server, and technically it can scan your system, it can scan your Magento installation and give you a feedback about potential issues with the specific modules. So unlike that's probably one of the big things that you can do. And plus this tool collect information not just from one store, they collect this information across different websites, across different platforms, WooCommerce, Magento, Magento 1, etc. So you can be notified about those security flows in your system even before the hackers will do that. What's the typical injection looks like? Basically, if you are on Magento 1 or you are on Magento 2, the typical injections usually will be done through admin panel, when someone can embed the specific HTML or JavaScript code into your head section or footer section, right? That's probably the number one stuff that you can double check and make sure you're checking this, I would say, quite often, just to make sure there is nothing that you do not really recognize over there. Another stuff that I think will be nice for you guys to trigger, that's one of the situations that happened with one of the clients. Basically, somehow, again, I'm not quite sure how, but somehow they get access to the database and they also added a trigger in the database. So basically, even if you remove the code once from one table using this trigger, they were able to like every single time refresh this code again and again. So that was a very tricky part. We spent quite a bit of time finding this out. So this is just to keep you in the loop of how hackers could be, dangerous. You guys should know about like this is webinar not just about the Magento 2, but I've noticed there's a lot of Magento 2 business owners who's joining this session. You have to keep in mind that if you Google Magento life cycle policy, you have to keep in mind when there is an end of the software support. So Adobe 2.3 version, for example, the end of support will be in September, 2.4 line will be in November, etc., etc. So you have to always watch for upcoming updates, upgrades, etc. Plan that maybe ahead of time. With those updates, I have to be quite honest with you. Between 2.3 to 2.4, it's more or less clear. 2.4.4 not yet released, to be announced. They plan this to be announced, I think, on March 8th, 2022. But one of the big stuff that you have to keep in mind that this will work on PHP 8, like completely different PHP version. So I'm assuming the upgrade from 2.4.3 to 2.4.4 probably would not be as easy as possible, because a lot of probably software vendors who supplying you modules, extensions, etc., they probably will have to do some changes in the code. You can also understand that even if you keep Magento whenever even WooCommerce updated every single time, you still have to. It does not really protect you um, from being hacked. So end of the day, for example, this is the patch that all of you, if you are running on Magento 2, let's say, you can take a look. There is a recent patch that was announced just in February 13 that should be installed. It's basically affecting Adobe Commerce or Magento Open Source as well edition. And as you can see here, the version like 2.30 and 2.3.3 are not affected, right? So if you were running 2.3.1, I mean, that would not really be part of the issue. So that's kind of tricky. I mean, you're always expecting the vendor to deliver, all the patches, but as we can see, sometimes the most recent versions still have an issue, which you can watch, that you have to watch out. Basically, if you, I think the generic page that you can visit from time to time, it's from on Adobe security.html, which is basically giving you all of the information about the updates. So technically, probably that's something that you can add to your favorite, and kind of track this as you go. Another website that I highly recommend you maybe to go ahead and check it, it's magereport.com, which might eventually, you can just put your URL, scan it, and it will show you a bunch of the other stuff. So if you are not quite sure which patches being installed, which patches you still have to install, the magereport.com can probably give it, I mean, I'm not saying like 100% accurate data, but very close. So you can just watch this out by yourself without asking your developers to do that. What's the generic practice of securing your interface, right? So obviously you have to use the SSL certificate. Obviously you have to use secure HTTPS protection in the admin, right? Which is basically the settings in Magento. We're always trying to recommend to use a custom admin URL that only you will know. I can hear sometimes developers, they trying to block this URL from Google, and they put the URL inside of the robots.txt file. Please don't do that, because otherwise, I mean, then your admin URL can be easily extracted from the robots.txt. So if you decided to go ahead and have a custom, not you decide, but like you should definitely do that, but just don't put it in the robots.txt file. What you can also do is you can using htaccess or nginx settings, you can protect and make sure that this specific URL will be accessible only from the specific IP addresses, which is again pretty easy things to do. Some of the hosting vendors, they eventually keep this as a settings by default, like on Sanasi, for example, which is UK-based Magento hosting. The admin page would not really be available unless you have a secure cookie on your website, etc. So there's a couple ways how you can protect it. The next one, obviously, probably if I'm not mistaken, starting from 2.4, you can enable the authentication with Google, right? When you have a code on your Google app that you have to enter to log into Magento admin panel. Also, definitely reCAPTCHA. So basically, what I find right now those days, a lot of Magento websites affected by the spammers, by the bots, when they go ahead and they submit a lot of, let's say, customer data, a lot of subscribers, like a fake subscribers. You as a business owner, you probably would not even recognize how they're doing that. So if you go to Magento, click on the customers, and if you'll see a lot of profiles that you cannot even recognize. Sometimes it's with the Russian, sometimes it's with the Chinese symbols, etc. That means that your website is under, well, I'm not saying it's under attack, but it's basically the bots coming in. And also you can take a look into marketing newsletter subscribers just to make sure there's nothing wrong over there as well. If you want to protect that, then basically probably installation of the reCAPTCHA data will stop it. I do know recently those bots, even we installed the reCAPTCHA, those bots, they basically still bypassing that. So in that case, probably one of the good idea would be just to go ahead and set up the Cloudflare and block some specific countries. Another idea maybe to protect your admin panel will be with the, let's say, extra htaccess protection, which can be done on the server side. Obviously, like if you have to watch any files that will be on your FTP folder, right? So if you're using Git repository, let's say on your project, you can do like a Git status check, and see if there is a new files on the folder or not. So that's kind of something that I would recommend you to watch out as well. Make sure that you have correct file permissions for the files and for the folders in the Magento. In terms of the Cloudflare, this is something that we generally install to all of our customers. Basically, with the Cloudflare, let me just quickly show you here. With the Cloudflare, I want to show you. It's a free tool. Well, I mean, they have a paid plan as well, but they also have a free one. Even with the free one, they have this firewall section, which you can utilize. You can see like all of their all of the events, etc., etc. So basically, you can see which URLs, which countries, etc., etc. And usually for all of our customers here in Firewall Rules, we are trying to set the rule that will, like for example, if you want to create a new one, you can block, let's say, Russia, you can block China. You can, for example, if you don't do business in those countries, right, you can it's not in you can even limit only by the countries that you do business with, etc. So that's pretty sophisticated. Sometimes what we also do, sometimes you have to add extra protection, especially when you have this credit card attack going to your website. Basically, in this case, customers they basically probably use the database of the stolen credit cards. We've seen that a couple of times with the customers. So basically, they still use the IP addresses that belongs to United States, for example. Maybe they have a different network of servers, etc. So they basically they're doing transactions like every minute, and they post the order with the real credit card information, but that was just a stolen card. So on some of our clients, we have a request, for example, extra rate limit on the Cloudflare, basically, that helps to protect from that. So basically, if there's activity in like 1 minute, like you see 500 requests per 1 minute, then we will ask for like GS challenge, just to make sure it's not like a robot, it's not like a bot. So that's I would say at least like basic things that you can think about implementing to the website, and those ones that that's pretty kind of like a checklist that you can use to try to protect your website. I think like that was quite all that I want to kind of cover in like first like 10-15 minutes. Jane, I will pass it over to you then. We'll stop sharing my screen and we'll let you continue from here.
Great, thanks. And if you could just confirm while I share my screen that you're seeing the full view. There we go. Are you able to see the full view?
Yeah.
Cool. So that was super interesting information.
I can see the Chinese market.
Oh yeah,
If
that
that's
was not intentional, but
okay. Okay.
But anyways, yeah, so it's super interesting. I think what we're going to try to do now is kind of bridge the gap between what Paul was just discussing and how we are seeing that show up in our customer base. And Paul, I'm just noticing that we are wearing the same shirt color.
Okay.
Alrighty, so let's just jump right into it. So let's talk a little bit about e-commerce sales. Obviously, and this is no new news to people, e-commerce sales skyrocketed, especially over the course of the pandemic, as a lot of merchants had to move their businesses online. I was actually just at a payments conference, and I think they said the typical development it takes for a non-web-based merchant to usually build that infrastructure has been about 10 years for that industry. And of course, they had to do this in a matter of months, which of course resulted in a lot of businesses not being prepared for the fraud retributions. And so just some numbers for you. In 2021, e-commerce sales reached a little over $4.9 trillion, and that is expected to grow 50% over the next 4 years. So, even though things are opening back up, I think that customer behavior has really shifted to focusing on fast online transactions. And so we can expect that to continue in the next few years. Oops, I think I skipped one too far. The other thing, and this is from SIFT data that we gathered from 2020. We're still crunching the numbers for 2021, and it's going to come out in a new report that should be out in a few weeks. But the thing about fraud is that we saw kind of a parallel increase in fraud targeting e-commerce businesses as well. So previous SIFT data showed that in 2019, the average fraudulent order was about $1,200, and that increased almost double in the following year. And so, I'm sure everyone, or at least Paul and I on this call, know that, fraud goes where the money is. And so, merchants and e-commerce needs to be prepared for that, that shift as well. The other thing that I will say that we're noticing is the way in which fraud is occurring. Bad actors are becoming a lot more sophisticated. So they're getting really good. Paul, you mentioned, spoofing IP addresses, knowing which IP addresses to kind of emulate. And so that is being seen as an added challenge as e-commerce businesses try to combat fraud. A few interesting things. I mentioned I was just at a conference, but someone from JP Morgan actually told us we were talking about card testing, and obviously, card testing is the automated, um, not always automated, but when a fraudster has a bunch of credit cards that they obtain from some sort of database, and they're just bulk testing them against your platform. And one I guess I'm not too surprised, but I thought a sad kind of reality was she mentioned that SMB e-commerce gets hit the most with card testing attacks. And why is this? It's because they know that a lot of SMB, uh, often are smaller in size. They are smaller in size, in fact, but they know that their fraud tools and their perhaps their perimeter defenses are not as sophisticated as, let's say, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons, and so they, understanding that, will target that particular sector. A few interesting data points on the left side. These are trends that we saw over the course of the pandemic. We saw lodging, professional marketplaces, omni-channel retail, digital wallets. Those were being hit extra hard during the pandemic. I think marketplaces, obviously, marketplaces and omni-channel retail for obvious reasons that we talked about, e-commerce trending upwards. That's why we saw the increases there. But the interesting thing with lodging, so I don't know about, I mean, I'm assuming most people on this call were not traveling or, booking hotel accommodations or Airbnbs over the course of the pandemic, but we did see a spike in the fraud rate in the lodging sector uh, in 2020. And that obviously is the fraudsters kind of really taking advantage of these vulnerable moments that businesses are occurring. There were lots of cancellations happening. There were, early in 2020, people trying to rebook due to all the uncertainty that we were dealing with. And so that extra traffic that was occurring in that vertical at the time kind of let the fraud slip under the radar, when volumes were kind of volatile. So I want to step back and talk a little bit about the fraud economy. We hinted a little bit that fraud is becoming a lot more sophisticated. We have scripted attacks, we have credential stuffing attacks, we have card testing attacks that are scripted. And so just to give a little bit of an idea of the way that we think about how fraud works at SIFT, we call it the fraud economy. And so I guess the one sentence description of the fraud economy is that it's a well-connected ecosystem of fraudulent actors that pretty much buy and exchange their goods and services. And so we see the way I like to describe it is that it operates very much like our traditional economy. So they have marketplaces, they have different types of skilled labor, uh, higher valued credentials in for that matter, or in this example, they go for a higher cost. And so they're extremely well connected. We'll go into a little bit about what we do see in the bad actor ecosystem in a few slides. But data from 2020, and again, we're still working out the numbers from the last year, but $1 trillion was lost to cybercrime in 2020. So that's astronomical. I think at the rate that we've seen e-commerce growing, we've seen, you know, in the SIFT network, the fraud rates growing. I expect this to just continue to move upward in the next few years as well. And then last point that I want to raise about the fraud economy is that we mentioned that it's interconnected, and you could see this in the illustration over to the right. But what we're seeing now in terms of the sophistication is that the types of fraud are sort of blending together. And so it's not just one fake account that is running a stolen credit card. What we're seeing is bad actors or these nefarious actors hacking into legitimate accounts and then trying to do some card testing attack. And of course, this is because a lot of businesses that, let's say, don't have as sophisticated set of technology to help with their fraud, they'll they'll allow certain activities for more reputable customers. And so hacking into an account allows for a bad actor to, again, potentially slip under the radar, under the guise of a reputable user. And so I think that's the interesting thing that we've been noticing. I work with an e-commerce merchant actually pretty closely, and we have started seeing that a lot of their hacked accounts are starting to do the credential stuffing, hacked accounts are starting to do the card testing. Whereas I would say 5 years ago, we kind of saw them happening as individual abuse types. You saw a bunch of accounts being hacked, and then a bunch of fake accounts running the stolen credit card. So, of course, this makes it all the more challenging for merchants to discern what type of behavior is good coming from their good, well-meaning users, and what type of behavior is bad coming from bad actors that have compromised the accounts of their well-meaning users. And so, Paul, I think this is a nice complement to what you were talking about in terms of, just breaches and hacks and, just the perimeter defense. But I don't know about you or the audience, but I have probably been notified in the past year about being involved in 3 data breaches, I think, in the past year. And that's just me personally. All my friends have been involved. I always take a survey of the audience when I do the live conferences, and it's almost 100% of the room has been involved in a data breach. And of course, we hear about these on a weekly basis. And so what each of these data breaches do, what they are pieces to a puzzle. What the nefarious actors are doing is that they are gathering pieces of information, building up their database of credentials so that they can later sell and kind of launch an assault attack. This is just one of the major ones that we saw back in 2021. And again, I have a friend who was just notified that she was part of a recent breach in the past month. The other interesting thing that we do see with these types of breaches, we do see that correlation between breach and the fraud rate, right? So we'll see a customer's, not a customer's, but a merchant's database, was leaked, or a bank of credentials was leaked. Then we will see either on the dark web or within our block rates, we will see a spike. And so I think that the 2 events kind of happening one after the other really shows just how quick and how much information that these people do leverage against platforms. So this is an example of a screenshot that we got from the dark web. This was a very popular dark web marketplace. One of the things that my team and I do is we look on the dark web and Telegram just to understand what type of credentials are being bought and sold. Just to understand the ecosystem. And so I think this one is an interesting one because a few columns here. In the third column, you see, this is for Hilton accounts. And so you can assume that each row that you see here is a combination of, at the very minimum, a username and password. But on the third column, you see that they even have the number of points that are tied to a particular loyalty account. The center column, you see that they have credit card information. And then all the way over on the right column, you see the price range that these accounts go for. We mentioned earlier that the fraud economy kind of operates like traditional economy. A question that I always get when I show these slides is, how do we know that these are legitimate? How do we know that the person selling this information actually has that information? The interesting thing is, on the dark web and in Telegram, they have this is kind of funny to say, but a code of ethics amongst the fraudsters. And so they have review systems. They have forums where if they get scammed by a scammer, they'll let the community know, hey, this person's not good for their word. Hey, they're not reputable, or I've run into issues with this particular seller. So at SIFT, we talk a lot about digital trust and safety. And basically, the one sentence summary for what we mean by digital trust and safety is protecting against fraudsters while also growing your business. And the unfortunate thing that we do see a lot of the times when we work with prospects is, they'll get hit by a fraud attack. So they'll implement a hard rule that ends up blocking a lot of good traffic eventually. And this is because we are in a adversarial space. I'm thinking about my time at Facebook where, we would, this is early on during my time there, but when we would try to implement hard rules, but again, these are super smart, super sophisticated bad actors using technology. And so they keep testing, hey, what is their threshold at? And they'll just go slightly under that. And then we'll adjust that threshold and they go slightly under. And, that cycle continues. So it's about intelligently blocking or intelligently assessing the type of activity and throwing the right type of friction depending on the suspicious activity that you do see. At SIFT, we do this with 4 main products, soon to be 5. We recently acquired Keyless, which is biometric assessment. But our 4 main products, we do this via account defense. This is for the ATOs, the account takeovers, the compromised accounts, payment protection. This is for the fraudulent payments, stolen payment credentials, and content integrity. You can think of content integrity as scams, spam, that type of nefarious content that can actually be posted on marketplaces as well. And then lastly was an acquisition we made last year with dispute management. This is in layman's terms for chargeback representment. So, friendly fraud, where a customer that actually purchased and received the good or service that they purchased from you, when they dispute that down the road, that's where our dispute management product comes in helpful for our customers. And so if I had to summarize recommendations in 3 main points, one is to have a holistic approach, right? And so this means one, leveraging the right technology. Again, because the bad actors are technologically sophisticated, it only makes sense that we kind of match their energy when it comes to combating the fraud. And then be proactive. I think one other interesting thing that, not interesting, it kind of was a confirmation that I heard from JP Morgan at the payments conference I was just at, was they know which merchants are new. They know which, because they're testing this in bulk across the board. It's not really targeting one specific, it's targeting all. And so it's really important to be proactive. The unfortunate case that we do see a lot of the times when prospects come to talk to us about a fraud problem they have is that there's already a hole and they're bleeding. And so, I think it's not a matter of if the fraud is going to come to you, it's when. And so we always do try to prepare or have people be prepared beforehand. And so when we talk about technology, SIFT, I mentioned we are a digital trust and safety platform. We use machine learning. How do we do this? We have a massive global data network. And of course, we are taking tens of thousands of different behavioral signals, doing analysis. I think one of the most interesting ones that I heard of was, we analyze whether a phone is plugged into a charger, right? And this, of course, is useful in the case of click farms that we hear of. I don't know if you all have seen that meme. I think it's a meme, but there's like 100 phones on a wall, and it's a click farm where people are paid to just tap for engagement. And so for certain use cases, that is a risky signal. If you see a bunch of connected phones connected to an IP address that are all plugged in via phone charger, we bump that up as a risky signal. And so with SIFT, what we do is we throw out a score, a risk assessment. And so that ranges between 0 to 100, 0 being the least risky and 100 being the most. And so let's break down this score of 99 and what we mean by that. I think I skipped one. So I mentioned we have about, I think, 16,000 signals is our official marketing term, but about 16,000 signals that we are analyzing across our global data network of brands that we work with. I mentioned the wall charger example, but there's a number of different types of signals that we are looking at. We're looking at device ID, the velocity. So again, if it comes to a card testing case, does it seem like one account is just running through cards one after the other? Are you seeing repeated declines coming one after the other? The other thing we do is we look at site activity, and we'll go over this type of example in a few slides. But if you have a well-meaning user that comes to your platform, a very normal type of activity is for them to do some browsing, to shop around a little bit, and then put an item into their basket. Whereas what we're seeing with bad actors is they don't really care about the item. Actually, they do care about the item. We do see it with high value goods like electronics, but if they are just trying to card test to test the validity of a particular credit card that they do have, we'll often see that there's very little browsing activity, and they just immediately go to a shopping cart, and we see a bunch of auth failures immediately after that. I really like this example because it kind of gives you an idea of the depth of the analyses that we're doing on the back end. Again, this is across the many signals that we are looking at, but I mentioned, back when I worked at Facebook, when we used a little bit more of rules-based or hard rules to block particular types of attacks. I like this example because it kind of tells you why that's not effective in the long run. So what we're doing here is we're analyzing not just an email domain. So Yotmail is a disposable email domain. It is a favorite of many fraudsters because you could basically enter in an email, and if you're not doing the right email types of verification, if you're not doing the right types of verification, they can circumvent a lot of the verification steps that you do have. So you want to take a holistic look at the email combined with perhaps where they are shipping the purchase to. So some things that we do look at is, hey, is the consonant to vowel ratio, what does that look like? Does it look like a bunch of gibberish numbers or a bunch of gibberish letters? Of course, that is an indicator. If an email address does look a little gibberish to you, that could mean that it's scripted, or there is a higher chance that that's a scripted email address. And so we're kind of not taking just one look at a particular part of an email or a particular part of a shipping address or a country. We're kind of taking a combination of everything, of the whole picture. And so I want to talk about a little bit about dynamic friction. What does this mean? We talk about digital trust and safety. I hinted about applying the right type of friction depending on one, what your risk tolerance is and what the risk assessment is. And so here we have a user. Let's say they log into their account, which is completely normal activity. There's no failed logins. So if we're thinking in the SIFT range of scores from 0 to 100, we'll call it a 5, which is very low score when we think about across the SIFT scores. And then let's say they immediately after that add a $10 gift card to their cart. Gift cards, while not inherently fraudulent, they are one of the preferred currencies of bad actors because they do hold that cash value. We're seeing that actually the preferred currency is shifting from gift cards to cryptocurrencies. But for this example, let's just say they add a gift card. And then they start browsing. So yes, they had a risky type of behavior, but they start kind of emulating good user activity. So we bump down that score to 15. And then say during this purchasing process, they suddenly then change the payment method on file. So that, of course, if a user is immediately doing that, yes, there are legitimate reasons why that might be necessary, but let's just say for this example, we want to consider it a little riskier. We'll bump that up to 75, and then immediately after they order an iPhone. Of course, if bad actors are actually making a purchase on your platform, they're targeting goods and items with a high resale value. So electronics, we do see an overwhelming number of merchants dealing with electronic items when it comes to fraudulent purchases. So once this suspicious activity takes place and we score it at 85, we allow our merchants to decide, okay, I think traditionally the two options were, do you either want to block this or do you want to allow? But when we say dynamic friction, what we mean by that is giving them different options of what they want to do, what the merchants want to do. So at this point, you can decide, hey, I want to approve. Given this customer journey, I would not automatically approve this order, nor do you want to cancel it, just in case this was a legitimate case of someone, with an expired credit card. The three options in the center that you see, those are the different types of friction points that we have seen some of our merchants use. So you can either at that point decide to 3DS them. You can decide to SMS check them. I think the e-commerce merchant that I mentioned earlier, at a certain score, what they decide to do is request the full card number. So if someone's using a stored payment credential, and then they detect a handful of signals that indicate account takeover. Okay, let's see if this person actually has the credit card. We're going to do the full card number, CVV, all of the extra checks just to make sure that this person actually holds the card. I think that might be it in terms of content that we had. Paul, did you have anything to add?
I definitely have a couple of questions. The number one stuff, it's if you can post your email into the chat section, so everyone who is attending this webinar, if someone needs to have a private conversation with you, they would be able to go ahead and send it over. So that's number one. Number two, I've got the question from one of our attendees. Basically, and I'm kind of in line with that. So the payment gateways, that's like Stripe and Braintree, they already have some algorithm in place. They potentially have like a 3DS secure that can be enabled. They have address verification system. So basically, the attendee is asking, like, how SIFT in that case could be helpful with those type of payment providers?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It actually just had a conversation with a prospect about, and they use Square, and I think their feedback on using, your processor gateway is that there's a lot happening on their end that you might not have the autonomy to make adjustments to because they are running their machine learning, their algorithms, and so. Kind of taking that into not in-house, and so it would be like with a third party like Sift, but what we advocate for is giving the merchant enough signals to make the decision that they know about their customer base, because there are also caveats to each business, right? And so what we say is the merchant knows their business the best, and relying too heavily, I think, on the Squares, on the Stripes, Braintrees. I think there's a lot of opportunity that's missed, I think, via like false positives, and the autonomy that the merchants that you don't get.
Basically, one of the stuff that I want to mention here, you guys supposed to have a modules that's already plug and play, right, for the different e-commerce platforms. Is it like how hard to connect Sift into, let's say, Magento, WooCommerce, Shopify?
Yeah, so we have a very low no code integration and partnership with Magento, right? And so that is we do try to make it understanding that not everyone has that the most companies actually don't have the resources to really sorry, I have to exit out of that. Yeah, so they don't have the resources to really invest in that the tech required to come online and come online and also have the appropriate fraud protection. And so that is why we partner and do webinars like this to really advocate for the ease of integration that we do try to provide with our partners.
Okay, okay. The big question that I have, let's imagine I'm the merchant, right? And like shit happens. Basically, I've got tons of transactions, and just to answer the original attendee question, if you have a web store and you use the Stripe and you don't have any attack to your website, Stripe will work awesome. Like you can accept the payments. But trust me, I do have a clients, they do use the Stripe, and then this carding attack starting, Stripe declining transaction for any reason, but still you will be charged at a processing fee, if I'm not mistaken, like 30 cents or something like that for each transactions, for each attempt. That's what Jane just mentioned about, like, it's basically going and checking the credit cards to your website, which might be, and again, I think we did like we do know some of websites which were affected by this attack. Then the payment gateway, PayPal, Braintree, whenever Stripe, then they can see a lot of those like issues with your account. They can flag you, and eventually they can tell you, hey, you cannot use our gateway anymore. So now, question for you, Jane. Let's imagine I'm the merchant, and let's imagine that you have uh, the merchant who already under that attack that happens. How, like, what's the steps to recover? What do you recommend, like, for them? Like, what's the steps?
Yeah, you mean recovering
Yeah,
from like being by their gateway or?
yeah, let's say payment gateway, they basically telling you, hey, I mean, your account flagged because of this fraud activity, etc., etc. Like, what you would recommend, like, for them to recover that account?
Yeah, so we actually do see customers like this that have been enrolled in the Visa chargeback warning programs, right? And so for those, we always one typically, if that's the case, it's because um, there is an attack, right? And so I think in those cases, if there is a hole where they are bleeding, it is sometimes there are necessary places for rules, right? So if you see a bunch of accounts, and typically we can take like uh, our UI shows this, where say you have a card testing attack and all of the cards are coming from a particular bin, right? So we see, okay, this particular bin, we're seeing a lot of declines or a lot of chargebacks coming from it. What we then do is let's take a look at that bin in general and see, hey, is this involved in an attack? We try to find the signals that can trace the attack and then block it at the time. And then we build those into the automation that we allow the merchant to kind of to customize for their business within our UI. And so one, it's understanding the common signals that are part of the attack, which our UI allows you to do, and then again implementing some sort of automation to prevent that bleeding. And then we do a lot of consulting with customers and non-customers actually on, hey, if you're limited in terms of resources when it comes to representing chargebacks, helping customers identify, okay, which chargebacks are worth fighting and which just aren't, right? Because if you only have a team of 2 people that are working on your customer support team that, and you have 1,000 chargebacks a month, that you need to represent. Let's get smart about what we do try to win, and then plug the holes in regards to the fraud that could have been prevented.
Is there any specific, like a minimum revenue that I have to be at to join SIFT as a client?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not on
Okay.
the
Okay.
purchase and sales side,
Okay.
but
Okay.
yeah, it could be something that we follow up with
Okay.
with you on. Yeah.
No, that's pretty much the generic question that I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
So there is a comment from Daniel about like if the reCAPTCHA and Cloudflare should prevent that type of account. I mean, definitely, you know, that type of stuff that we just discovered and we mentioned, you have like basically all of the stuff that we just provided to you. That's exactly what might happen. Again, like that's the part of the webinar, just to go over that. Let me do this way, guys. I'm going to share my screen one more time as a just to showcase maybe some of their promotion codes to the Magenta extensions that we distributing to our clients, to attendees of our webinar. Please don't publish them online, but like if you recognize one of the brand that you use in terms of extensions, feel free to use those codes just to save some money. What else? Yeah, I think if you still have some questions, go ahead, post it here. If not, then probably you can send. Oh, I did not really post my email, but that's fine. You know me, so it's paul@magecloud.net. So I think if there's no other questions, then I want to say thank you for everyone who joined us for this webinar. Video recording will be available. We'll send it to you shortly. And yeah, I mean, stay safe, guys. You know, I'm here in Ukraine. I'm also safe. So stay safe from credit card. And I'm hopefully this year will bring more revenue your way and less troubles. And thank you for participating. Thank you, Jane, for being as a guest. And looking forward to see you guys on our next webinars. Okay, we're good. Thank you, guys. I'm good. All right, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Jane, thank you very much. Morgan as well. Speak to you guys soon. And yeah, have a good one.
Stay safe. Bye. Thank you.